Hi, everyone. This is Nathan Long, president of Saybrook University. For 10 years now, I have presided over this really incredible institution comprised of impressive students and alumni, impeccable, well heeled faculty and staff who have really done a fabulous job of carrying on the mission of this institution. Over the last few hundred episodes now, I think we're getting up to, I've interviewed so many dedicated, loyal, innovative thinkers across the collective that represent, I think, the best of who we are, that really carry the torch for our humanistic mission. Today's episode is the best of faculty, the best interviews that we have produced over these 100 plus episodes, and our wonderful doctor, our wonderful Mr. Phil Jean-Grande, our podcast producer, has curated this selection, which I think you're going to love. Thank you all. Take care and be well. I know your mentorship has meant a lot to the students, and I know your colleagueship has been great for our students. And you've been doing a lot as a clinician and as a researcher and as a leader in psychology. So I've got some more pointed questions around your work with kids and in the wellness space. But before we do that, I think our audience needs to know just how vast your work has been in different areas of practice, research, and in psychology leadership. So maybe give us a taste of what you've been up to. And full disclosure, Donna and I had the opportunity, so I'm talking to the audience here, right, of me seeing her give her presidential address at the APA National Convention, and also honoring our founder, Dr. Eleanor Criswell. And it was then that I really saw you in a whole different light. And so I kind of maybe stepped on your lead there, but maybe give us a taste of what you've been up to over these years in those spaces.
I'd love to know what the different light was.
A very positive one, let's say that.
I see. Well, yes, so I was elected president of Division 32 of the American Psychological Association, which is humanistic psychology. And one thing I found was in a sort of patriarchal sense within the psychological and psychiatric world that women hadn't really been given their due. So if we have certain things we can accomplish during that 1 year, and one thing I wanted to accomplish was creating a award honoring, celebrating women in humanistic psychology, whose names are not on awards, whose names are not on plaques on walls. Marie Curie, Madame Curie, the only reason she was able to get her awards that she did, her prizes in science and chemistry, was because a man spoke up for her, an ally. Without that, we would never have known of her name. And by the way, I wrote my college essay on her, wanting to be like Madame Curie,
That's so cool.
aside from the radiation part.
Right.
But, you know, when we step into the therapy room with people, we have to be willing to sit in their pain with them, and it's a honed skill, and it's an important skill, which is why mindfulness is critical for practitioners who are sitting in the room in sacred space with another person to be able to come from that quieted spot where wisdom grows, where wisdom is born. So that's where my most of my work is. So I created an award that year celebrating women in humanistic psychology, and I honored one of the greatest women in humanistic psychology who you fell in love with
The moment I
just
met
a
her.
few minutes after myself. So did I. I was at San Francisco State University, and I met her there at a Division 32 conference, and I saw her just like you. I imagine it's the same thing. I completely fell in love. Like my mouth was hanging open, and I interviewed her. It's on SHP TV, Society for Humanistic Psychology TV on YouTube, which I also started bringing media into our psychological world. So there's a whole storehouse of videos there. And the interview with her is there. And I just decided to name the award after her because she deserved it. She came up with somatic approaches to psychotherapy she understands that, to quote another person's work, the body keeps the score.
Love that book. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes.
She allowed the science to move in that direction and was the founder of the original Saybrook University when it was a research institute. So my goodness, right? And it's just been a pleasure to watch her blossom even in her later years, in her third, I call it third chapter bliss. And thank you too for creating a scholarship in her name to further honor her and the roots of humanistic psychology, which cares so much about the heart and soul of a person, about their actual lived experience.
Dr. Wilmarth, first things first. Like, when I first came to Saybrook, I got psychology, I got counseling, I got mind body medicine, like the discipline. And then I saw this degree called psychophysiology. And I'm figuring, what in the world is this thing? And then I learned about it, and it was pretty impressive what all you do, both you and your colleagues and the students you teach. So, maybe in terms of framing for laypersons, what exactly is psychophysiology?
Well, and I'll add a word to that because our department specifically is applied psychophysiology. So, it's taking the science of physiology and looking at the applications on it. But, my elevator speech for that is that it's the science behind mind-body medicine. Um, there, psychophysiology, of course, you break it down, psycho, mind, physiology, body. So it is a mind-body approach, but it's looking at the actual underpinnings of it so that we actually measure what's going on in the body, whether we're talking about heart rate variability or muscle tension or brainwave activity. There are a lot of biological markers within the body that respond to the environment, including thoughts. So, like one of the demonstrations we give in our intro classes is we hook someone up just for galvanic skin response, just two little electrodes on the fingers, which basically is measuring the sweat gland activity. Um, and then when you get them to watch the screen, it'll calm down. They'll have this nice, calm, relaxed state. You can ask them a question as simple as, "Do you mind if I ask you something personal?" And then within 3 seconds, if you watch the screen, you'll see the thing jump off the top. It skyrockets because it takes about 3 seconds for the question to go to the ear, to where the change in perspiration is already there. As the person thinks, "What is he going to ask? What am I going to say? What am I not going to say?" So even though they always say fine. They don't look any different, but they can see themselves that the computer has picked up a huge shift physiologically just because of that question. So there was no physical contact. It was simply a thought. So if you want to demonstrate the connection between mind-body therapy, mind and body, just a simple question like that can show them that there's a major physiological shift out to their fingertips within seconds just based on that. So you can imagine what kind of changes we go into when we're exposed to trauma and challenges and all of the day-to-day activities we go alone, let alone the major crises of life. So I think once you can help people recognize that strong connection between mind and body, our next step is to enforce the whole concept of self-regulation. That you can control some of those things, and that it's not something that we just have to look at and say, "Oh, that's happening," but we can actually learn and practice and develop skills to be able to self-regulate. So I've always looked at biofeedback and hypnosis in broad strokes as kind of the twin pillars of self-regulation. Things that you can take individuals that they can learn themselves to do rather than depending on something that's done to you. So the medical model has been wonderful in terms of surgery and some of the pharmaceuticals, but we've also become way too dependent on it and given up a lot of our own ability to manage stress, without the use of benzodiazepines.
What is a family to do nowadays in terms of treatment? And if they were to go in a more humanistically oriented direction, what would that look like from your perspective? If someone was diagnosed schizophrenic or another severe mental disorder.
That's a really interesting question. Just because, the way in which the field has gone is that if somebody has what is deemed to be a significant, severe, um, mental illness, if we want to use that term, medication is kind of is the first line of treatment.
It's a go-to, yeah.
I actually used to work with somebody here at Stony Brook who believed that ECT was the first line of treatment, and believe it or not, electroshock therapy is used quite a bit all over the country, and deemed to be a viable treatment for depression that is intractable, or bipolar disorder, or I think schizophrenia. But for me, that oftentimes, and especially since and people don't like to necessarily hear this or think about it, but we don't really know how a lot of these medications work. We know the mechanism of dopamine and blocking reuptake and so on, but we don't know how that converts to lucid thought, right, and coherent, cohesive thought. And so to me, that whole area is kind of like pounding a TV. I'm going to show my age, in the days when we used to have TVs that were thick enough to pound. Pounding a TV with your fist, because it's like you can't get reception on it, and hoping that it kind of clears up. And that is in some ways a lot of the treatment. Now, granted, I'm going to say that. That's one side of me, and that's the more critical academic side of me. The other side is saying that will say that these science is wonderful in that it's self-correcting, and that we over time we may not be in a perfect place now, but I trust science as a way to figure things out, and we just aren't there yet. And so in the meantime, understanding that that the people who are manifesting these behaviors are scared. I've talked with many clients or patients who they didn't really want to lose their hallucinations, because they were their only friends that they had. And so, I think that especially because the way in which popular culture treats schizophrenia is that we're afraid of people. But the reality of the situation is that people with schizophrenia are rarely violent and are safe. And so figuring out how to relate to them, to get in touch with the piece that's actually there, because the piece that you may be interacting with is they're hurting.
There's this raging debate about trauma, or it seems like, at least in the things that I'm listening and reading to, about it feels like everything is trauma. How do we distinguish what is trauma, what isn't? Or is that within our purview to determine? I don't know, but I'm curious. I know we're getting into territory where we could spend like hours, but I'd be curious your thoughts on it.
Well, this is actually coming up I teach the crisis and trauma interventions course in our master's program. So our start of the course is the foundations for understanding and conceptualizing what trauma-informed care is, as well as what is trauma-focused counseling. And so we look at both from the clinical mental health side of things, like what is trauma-informed care? Like what are those really specific concrete pieces in place? But then also from liberation perspectives and relational cultural theory, like how are we conceptualizing the source of harm? And if we conceptualize the source of harm, not from like the pathology model of what are the symptoms that show up to somebody who's been traumatized, but from the source of trauma, it's either interpersonal trauma, disaster-based trauma, like something big scale happened, or something individual happened to a person, and also be living in a society in which patriarchy, toxic masculinity, oppression, racism, gender oppression, all of these things are constantly present. And so those being a constant source of trauma and being in that soup, right? So being in this kind of background environment in which all these toxic environments are present, means that trauma is all around us all the time, unless we really intentionally cultivate spaces that are relational, that are humanistic, that are healing, that offer that alternative kind of counter space.
to talk a little bit about, race relations in the country. Where are you seeing progress? Where do you see us still getting stuck? Kind of almost as a part 2 follow-up to the Instagram live event, if you will. And I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. And it sounds like you've got a lot of hope based on your local work, but any other thoughts you might have from a more global systemic perspective?
You have to have hope and faith. But with that is the actions that do it for me. And where I gather that hope and faith from is by being more active. So, for example, I went to critical race theory summer school in actually last month, and this is my second year going. It's like a full week of just awesome. I think this year we had like over 170 presenters total. Totally a multitude of breakout sessions. I wish I could have just split myself and went to everything. But even with our plenary talks, it was amazing to see just how like you have hundreds of people that are on. And even there was a youth plenary that was led every morning, and it was completely youth led. And yeah, it was amazing. And it was things like that that give me that hope and encouragement to keep doing what I'm doing, because you see the youth getting more and more involved. And even like I have discussions all the time with my nieces and nephews. I'm like, you need to know these things, and you're our future. Like, so I need you. I just want to be there and keep having these discussions. So I think for me, that level of engagement and then getting younger generations involved is definitely what's keeping us going and what's going to take us further than we are now.
So that's cool. So you're starting, at least from your perspective, you're seeing more youth engagement, which is definitely a positive. I don't know that we always hear that. Like at least in my generation, when we were growing up, everyone was telling us you're not doing enough, and we probably weren't. So that's good to hear that you're seeing young people do more. Where are we getting stuck? From your point of view?
I think where we're getting stuck at is definitely on the political level with different laws and bills being passed. So you have all these people who are working towards change, working to try to educate and bridge gaps. But then you have legislations that are getting passed that not often caps it, but it creates a lot of barriers and challenges for us to be able to move forward in that collaborative healing space. So I think that that's part of it. And once again, that goes back to people voting, voting, and also being more involved politically. Like, not saying everyone has to be a politician, but just like knowing your candidates and who's running for office, what are their stances, what things do they support and not support, how have they been moving and shaping the world around them or influencing the world around them.
How do we address those big sticky issues, in business when it comes to, the state of the economy? Where are we with that? And how do we do that in a humane way? Because not every, business can't necessarily sustain itself if it just keeps operating with the same workforce, even though they're losing millions of dollars annually or what have you. So it's a lot to unpack there. So go at it from whatever angle you feel comfortable with. We're just chatting. So
Well, I guess what I would first say is maybe there's no answers. And maybe all of these different problems that we come up with, and we're like, okay, how do we, that is a familiar place that I've had to sort of suspend and say, okay, what if I took out how do we? And then I thought, well, when we try this, or so it doesn't appear like we are going to land on a platform that's got an answer, but we're actually joining a journey that's going to have many iterations. I know I frustrate sometimes the people around me because they're looking for some concrete. And there's been so many thoughtful, smart, brilliant, compassionate people who've put their heads together. And through all of that action, they land with something that you just said, which was a major impactful closure where people lose lives, they lose jobs. And for a series of actions, it led them to that place. And there's probably no one answer that would have prevented it. Maybe a series of answers, but all of these combinations bring us to a place of discomfort and uncertainty and doubt. And we often don't talk about how to live in that or even how to work through that. How can we stand at the edge of exhaustion? Because that's what it feels like for a lot of people, probably for that whole group. And the story would be, oh my gosh, there's another thing. The reality is we're all sort of on the edge of something. And depending on how you frame the story, it could be that it's awful or it could be, well, this is a place of regeneration, knowing that there's some struggles and consequences that come with it. Not This is not to dismiss any of it, but it's sort of, the pandemic was a great demonstration of what was really hard. And then when people started to say some of the things that were of a benefit, granted, this doesn't, like I said, dismiss how it really landed on, it landed disproportionately for sure. And it is not okay to sort of, swap stories and see who's got the best, the best coming out of the pandemic. But there were some things I was struck myself with how quiet Seattle became because the traffic was less.
Right.
I started to, the animals that started to rebound. So how the earth rebounded without our constant impact. So I guess my thought is, like, how do we sit in discomfort together? We've never talked about that at board meetings. It is really just driven by, how is this successful? And I think maybe it's going to be a while before people can actually say that and sit in it, because there's a lot of hard topics out there dealing with, climate change, dealing with racism, dealing with systems that just don't serve everybody. And we try to be a humanistic organization. We try to center people. And that in itself is really challenging to stand in when the system is not built that way. We have to almost wave the flag, continue to wave the flag and say, no, people are important. That's why this is important. We should try to look at it this way. So that's all over the board. How about that? There's no answer. I think that it's a great problem to sit in. And I think if we can be in some great problems to sit in and know, like, here's the reality is, I don't feel like I know much anymore. And I just completed my doctorate. I feel like I knew less than when I was 16. But maybe that's a great thing. Maybe that's the inverse of what I've always thought. It broke a mental model where I thought, gosh, if I get this, I will be prestigious. I will know everything. I'll be able to tell people what to do. And it's the reverse of that. But that actually is a more nourishing place to be, I think, for me.
Your first published book came out just a while back. What was the inspiration behind the book? Can you give us an overview of what it's about? What all is in it a little bit? Tease it, because we want people to buy it.
This is funny. So, if I may, I sat on this podcast with you maybe a year or two ago. I'm going to say 2 years ago, and talked about being a writer and the fact that, like, I have all these children's book ideas, and I just I just needed a yes. I just needed something to come to be, and what was going to happen, and I don't know what's going to happen, and just praying for something. And within a few months, I got a yes from a publisher. And so during COVID, I was writing a lot, and by February of 2021, I got a yes. And so I'm going to show you the book, but no one else can see it, but it's behind me. But the book is Dearest One. It exists. Lantana Publishing is my publisher. They're based in the UK. It is full of 12 affirmations, and this is why it's so aligned with, like, the mindfulness component of it all. So maybe you're right. I stay in the field. It's a great meditation, honestly. 12 affirmations or words of wisdom. It's written in the form of a letter from a grandparent to a little one, or written in the form of a letter to us as grown-ups, because I think grown-ups really appreciate it. So there are 12 of them, but I'll read the list to you. I could read them to you, but the affirmations are like: dare to smile, embrace the rain, find music in the quiet, turn your face to the sun, which is my favorite because it says turn your face to the sun and stand tall as a sunflower. And I always love that because sunflowers are my favorite. It talks about self-love, so show your self-love. Take up space, which is like something I think we all have to remember, that like we can take up space and not to kind of go into ourselves, but remembering that, like, we deserve to be here. Being brave even when you're scared, being gentle with yourself, choosing your path, your own path, shining your light, remembering who you are. And that's when it comes into talking about your ancestry and passing on the stories of your ancestors. And that's because the book was coming from a grandmother's perspective. And then knowing true love, knowing pure true love. And so, yeah, that's the book. And so I really do love this book. Even if only one copy had sold, I would have been okay, because to me, please don't only sell one copy. I've clearly sold more than one copy. But for me, it was just sharing the message of what I hoped my grandmother would have said to me. She passed before I was born, and I had no idea what she would say. So I wrote this wondering what she would say to me. So, Dearest One, it's available on Amazon, bookshop.org, barnesandnoble.com. I don't know. It's like pretty much if you Google Dearest One and Ariel dance.
If I'm a student, whether a master's or PhD, and I say, hey, Dr. Cleve, I want to do the specialization, can you give me a few skills? Again, you've sort of tapped into this, but maybe some specific outcomes that I might be able to expect to take with me to the workplace, to my college or university that I'm teaching at, to a school. Maybe just a few examples there.
Sure. One of the courses that we're dipping back into is expressive arts. So a lot of the clinical students that we're working with at Saybrook can tap into what they're probably doing anyway, sort of informally, where they're encouraging their clients to express through imagery, things that are really difficult to put into words. Sometimes you can capture by bringing in a photograph, by creating images, creating sculptures, those kinds of things. So I think it really enhances the clinical and therapeutic process of connecting with folks, especially with kids and older adults. And then, in other ways, we have some students who have a master's degree in fine arts. And so what they want to do is connect with psychology in a way that they understand how to help the kids that they're working with, maybe their art teachers or a dance teacher, and they're understanding more of the psychology that's behind it. So if you're coming to us creatively, then we're going to help you with the psychological components of it. If you come to us psychologically or business oriented, we're going to tap into the creative piece with you. So we really want to bridge those things and help innovate and help you be a leader in the dialogues about how we can assist.
When you joined us a couple of years ago, the program was really in its infancy and you were just getting started. You've done such a fabulous job. Maybe talk for a moment or two about how the PhD in integrative social work has evolved in that time under your leadership.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I mean, just unbelievable. I mean, we turn around, it's like 3 years have, gone by. So, yeah, we started, in the fall of 2020 with, believe it or not, 2 students. Yeah, yeah. So, as of now, we have about 48 students that are active. Okay. And we have a few on leave of absence due to various reasons, health, personal issues and all that. So again, out of all, control. I would say that, we have students from Alaska to New York City.
All over.
It is so amazing. Yeah, all over. And, the word is out there. So, just for example, I interviewed a prospective student as of late, and he said that, I usually ask prospective students, I mean, how do you find us? And this student said, I just Google, and then, our program is like the first or second that comes up. Okay. Yeah, and I think, another thing that I usually ask these prospective students too, is that sense of mission, okay, philosophy. Because if there is an alignment, okay, between who we are as an institution, as a program, and who they are and what they look for in a program and the impact that they would like to make in society, if there is an alignment, so that means that there's a great fit, and the relationship will thrive. And again, I mean, these students, I mean, they don't think that, hey, when I finish the program, I mean, I will leave Saybrook for good. That connection is like, lifelong.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Most of our students are, mid-career, level kind of professionals. And almost like 100% of our students, none of the people in their families, hold a doctorate. Okay. So, that can feel threatened for a lot of folks, right? Say, yeah, I can't believe it. I mean, I have my bachelor's degree, my master's degree, and now I'm in the doctorate program, doctorate program. And, I usually tell these students, just feel at ease because you are on the same boat, like like we are, and that breaks down a lot of barriers because students know one another. That hey, we are in this profession. You make to make an impact, in society with all integrative, humanistic, holistic approaches.